All right, guys, welcome into your modules on romantic relationships and how to recognize unhealthy dynamics and help you make empowered decisions to protect your identity and your peace. All that to say, how to know whether or not you are in the wrong relationships. Okay. And so this lesson is going to be broken up into three modules. And the point of all of these is to not just help you understand when you're in wrong romantic relationships, but it's like most people are taught that love is about sacrifice, it's about rescuing people, it's about fixing someone. Okay. This creates unhealthy patterns of tolerance, dependency, and self erasure in your relationships. The framework that I've created for this breaks down how to recognize unhealthy romantic dynamics and how to make empowered decisions so that you can protect your identity and protect your peace. And it's funny because I never thought that I could create a framework for how I was able to leave unhealthy relationships and find a healthy marriage. Me and my husband married 12 years. And at the time that I'm recording it, we actually started dating like this month, like 14 years ago. And I didn't think that I could break down how to actually do it, but I did. And so we're going to get right into it, starting with module one, which is tolerance, when survival becomes the standard. And so I want to talk about this first because, again, we're taught to tolerate. With my very first love, my very first relationship, and I talk about this in my book Noted. So if you don't have my book, go ahead and grab a copy from any of the links that you follow me from. My first relationship, it was very much like, how much can I tolerate? How much can I do for somebody else and they don't do for me? And I think that's where a lot of us begin, which isn't in alignment, but an adaptation to tolerance. We're bending, we're folding, we're reshaping ourselves to survive something that we think is love. It's just dressed up as love, but it's not. And it often starts with the guise of potential. We fall in love with the version of another person that showed up in the beginning of who they were when you first met them. And then we become committed to trying to get back there. You got so attached to who that person was at the top or who they could be that you're always trying to get to them instead of seeing them for who they are in that moment. And the rest of the relationship becomes a time machine, right? You're always saying, I know it could be like it was in the beginning. I know that things could be great if I just stay, if I just help, if I just stop complaining. Okay. That happened to me so much with my very first relationship. I was parenting him a lot. And again, I go into this full thing inside of my book and Noted. There's a whole chapter on how I went through this with the very first boy that I fell in love with when I was 15 years old. And everything was great at first. And then he kind of changed. And I stayed in that relationship for probably 6 months longer than I should have because I was so caught up in, well, I can just change him, or he has such great potential, or I see him and he just needs to be seen. And we can get back to where we were the whole first year we were dating, if just, right? And I was training myself, and these kind of relationships slowly train us to raise your pain threshold. What started out as like one red flag becomes a whole fucking parade of red flags. You become the person who can endure the most. And because society tells us that love is supposed to hurt, and it's not love if it's not complicated, and if it's not, messy, and if it's not a constant tug and pull, right, then it's not worth it. And we think that endurance is proof of our loyalty to these systems, right? But these relationships also tell us, and they also prove what patriarchy tells us, is that we're not worthy if we're not giving and providing to other people. And so when survival becomes the standard, right, that's us then again leaning into patriarchal concepts and patriarchal lessons that tell us that we have to overdo it and overprove to people, that we have to be more to people than we are to ourselves. Okay. And what you're really doing is collecting data on how much mistreatment you can survive. And that's not love. And it's never just physical or emotional harm. Sometimes the abuse is like public embarrassment. Sometimes it's slow humiliation, and your tolerance for mistreatment rises until you barely recognize who you've become. Because I tolerated that for so long again in my first relationship too. Like out of nowhere, my boyfriend started treating me really crazy and in front of our friends, and they'd be like, "Why are you treating her like that? Like, you guys are goals. Like, why would you do that?" And I became more about, well, he loves me. I'll just have to get him through this rough patch. And it became more about what I could tolerate as opposed to what I deserved. So where's the shift, right? It's what do you do? When do things start to change? And the shift happens when you start to say, I don't have to deal with this shit. I deserve better. Even if I have to be alone, I'll be happier in my own presence than I am in this, because that is what I decided when I finally decided to dump my first boyfriend was I don't have to do with this shit. I got a laundry list of people who would line up and happily treat me better. But even if I didn't, I would be much happier choosing myself and choosing my happiness than being in this relationship where I'm not feeling seen. Because that's when you decide that survival stops becoming the standard, right? And that's when love stops becoming a test of endurance and how much you can take. All right. This isn't about how much you can tolerate. Your love should not be a test of, well, this is how much I can take and I can take more than anybody else. That's just sign number one that you're in the wrong relationship is you're using your tolerance and your ability to see how much you can take. It's being pushed to the max and you shouldn't feel like that. So before you go into module 2, I want you to ask yourself and do this assignment after this module is identify one relationship where your tolerance level slowly increased over time. Where have you tolerated more now than you did at the beginning of your relationship? Write that down. Ask yourself, what was the moment I knew I deserved better? And why did I stay past that moment? Because you did. You probably recognized a while ago that you deserve to be treated better than you are being treated, and yet you still stayed. Why did you stay? And then ask yourself finally, if I removed history, if I wasn't so attached to this person, if we didn't have all this history, if we didn't have kids, if we didn't have a house, if we didn't have all of these things, would I still choose this person today, now, in this moment? Would I still be picking them today if our history wasn't the only thing that was keeping us together, the only thing that I was hanging on to so dearly? Would you still choose that person? Because you're not here to be a vault of pain. You're not here to absorb other people's issues for the sake of saying you have a high tolerance. You're not meant to be a container for someone else's unhealed parts to put together because a container just holds the part. It doesn't actually put it together into a puzzle, okay? Ask yourself, where have you tolerated more than you should have, and why do you still continue to tolerate? And do that before you hit up module 2.